Welcome to Season 4 of Purposeful Empathy, a show dedicated to conversations with people from around the globe who understand the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. Today's episode is brought to you by Grand Huron International, an on-demand coaching provider for individuals and companies. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the show. Welcome to a new episode of Purposeful Empathy. Today I'm joined by Asha Dixit, who is the new Executive Director of the Fraser-Hickson Institute, leading their flagship mini-biblio-PLUS project. The project's mission is to empower partners to instill in children a lifelong love of reading. Asha is a huge proponent of books and the power of stories to build foundational cognitive and social skills in children, including empathy, and secure their future success. So welcome to the show, Asha.
Thank you so much, Anita, for having me.
So let's start with why do you care about all this work? What do books and literacy mean to you? What attracted you to the work that you're doing now?
I love books and I've loved reading since I was a little kid. Books are very dear to me and stories are really powerful to me. I have to thank my father. He was the one who introduced me to books and this different world that you can get into just through the power of a story. He read to me and he did take me to different libraries, got me registered into a public library from where I could borrow books. And that is when my love affair with public libraries started. The books have really empowered me to understand situations or emotions through a different person's perspective. And it has empowered me to cultivate empathy in myself and has made me a more empathetic person. Early on in my life, I was starkly aware about the inequity surrounding me. And that is when I decided that I'm going to make helping children my career. And I moved from a corporate job to the NGO sector. Through the NGO sector, I taught children in India. And when we moved to Montreal, this move was a huge change for my husband and I. But I still wanted to continue in the field of literacy development in Canada too, and in Montreal. So what attracted me basically to a mini-biblio-PLUS powered by Fraser-Hickson was their mission, right? They wanted to bring books and the love of reading to the doorstep of the community. And they wanted to build this culture of reading and learning around books, around public libraries. This project started off in 2013 from 9 YMCAs and now currently serves 115 partners with 188 programs. What resonates more with me about mini-biblio-PLUS is the fact that they are focused on the first 1,000 days of life in a child's life and the importance of a parent reading to a child during this period, because these are the most formative years of a child's life when their brain is getting wired. This mission of ensuring that the parents and the children get the right resources, maybe through books, maybe through volunteers who go in and read to children, or maybe through workshops that we deliver to parents geared towards enabling them to use these books and resources at home to read to their children, motivated the board, the volunteer staff, and me into empathetic action, right? To bring in a change in the community through books and the power of stories.
And two things come to mind that I've read, and maybe you could affirm that this is true. But there's research that shows even having books in the house and having parents who are reading to themselves are all ways to signal to children the importance of books. And it actually has, maybe it's not a direct cause of their academic success, but there's a correlation that if they're surrounded by books and they see reading in their family situations, that their academic performance is actually enhanced. Is that true?
Yes, definitely. That's definitely true. The fact that children learn from observing their caregivers and parents at home. So if you have a lot of books, they're already interested in touching them and feeling them and seeing how they can play with them, right? And then when they see a parent just pick up the book, hold it and then turn pages, they're going to imitate you. They're going to do the same. And this is going to generate interest into reading further on. And there are ample number of studies that suggest that by the time a child reaches 5 years of age, the vocabulary that they have accumulated should be sufficient enough and could be enough for them if they have read well and they have been read too well for future success in their life and even scholarly achievement in their life.
Right. And that's really, you know, if that's not motivating enough, right, as parents who want your children to succeed, but there's also the element of how it really impacts them on a socio-emotional learning perspective. Like, I know there's research that shows adults who have read more fiction in their life have more empathy. Of course, we don't know whether or not more empathic people tend to be more consumers of literature. So, you know, chicken and the egg. But I feel that books not only prepare kids cognitively, but that they are truly helpful tools to help us become more emotionally literate.
Yes, nobody disputes that books and stories are important for children to, you know, transform into these economically productive individuals, but that's not the end goal. The end goal is to have a healthy and a sustainable society where individuals want to help each other, want to benefit each other and complement each other in the aspects of strengths and weaknesses, right? And books are those powerful vehicles that can develop socio-emotional learning into children so that they can handle their own emotions well. You can be empathetic to other people only if you learn to be empathetic towards yourself first. And that is what books allow you to learn, because when a child finds a relatable situation that a character in a book is dealing with, they understand, they want to know more, they want to read more, they want their parent to read that book 10 times to them until they get the gist of the book. And for example, you can go around teaching forgiveness to a child in the abstract, saying forgiveness is important, you have to forgive people, you should not be holding a grudge, but put that in a story, put that in with characters very relatable to the child, and the child will get it just like that.
That is so helpful. Thank you for sharing that. Well, initially you were exposed to books because your dad was a reader. He read to you, and that's how you fell in love with books. Just out of curiosity, is there a tale of a far-flung place that you can remember from some of the books that you read when you were a child?
Yeah, sure. Actually, my father read to me books about old Indian fables and tales. And these were tales related to animals doing various things and teaching us lessons, life lessons of helping and sharing. So this was about a monkey and a crocodile and how they used each other to kind of, you know, satisfy each other's needs and requirements and live a symbiotic life. So that is something that really struck me, and it made me feel that we can be as useful to others and others can be useful to us, and to live a life that need not be always a competition between people, but it's always good to use what others have as strengths to compensate for something that you're struggling with. And it's always good to ask for help.
That's so interesting, because what you're talking about is like the moral of the story is, how can a monkey and a crocodile really help each other out or be friends? They're so different. And yet you found the moral of the story was, you know, that there are always ways we can help each other out. Yeah, that's a powerful example. Thanks for sharing that. So how does reading to children as of birth help them develop empathy and other social skills?
Yes, definitely. Because empathy, according to me, or as the general definition goes, it's about putting yourself into somebody else's shoes and understanding and exploring what that person is feeling. And what other vehicle best than books and stories? Because it gives children this opportunity to actually place themselves in the shoes of the character, look from the perspective of the character, talk about what motivates the character, what emotions the character is going through. And I feel this process makes individuals and children able to relate to other members in the society and not make them feel alienated or boxed in their particular group of people that they know, right? And the best way to use books is what we follow at mini-biblio-PLUS when we train our volunteers, is when our volunteers are reading to children, or when we train parents to read more at home to their children, is to follow this simple step of asking what if, right? A situation based question game with the child, and asking the child as to what would you do if you were in this character's place. Okay, what would you say? Is there anything different you would have done from what the character did? Do you like how the character did XYZ? Or do you like how this bully did XYZ? And what do you think the response from the main character was? And was it good, bad? Should the character have done something else?
So can I interrupt you just for a second? Because this is so interesting to me. I have a 5-year-old. She's about to turn 5. By the time this gets posted, she'll be 5, but it's 11 days away as we're taping this.
Okay.
I'm reading to her at night. You know, we have some favorites, and I love reading to her. She loves the process of being read to, but I don't actually interrupt the book as I'm reading it. So is the suggestion, as you're going through the book, to actually interject with your own voice as the reader, saying, what do you think? And would you do that more than once in a book?
Yes, definitely. Anytime there is an opportunity in the situation, in the story, in the plot, or in the setting that lets you ask the child, go ahead and do it as many times as possible. What I tell parents generally is, you don't have to get through a book all the time. Even if you read 2 pages of the book and the child gets something more out of the story than the story itself, is great.
That's so interesting, because I have often had the reflex, and okay, audience, don't judge me, where as I'm reading, Annika interrupts me to like point out something on the page, and I'm never frustrated with her. I like give her the time, but I don't embellish. I don't add on. I don't like take a detour with her. I get back to reading, and maybe I'm missing something. So that's what you're saying, is that there's an opportunity for additional layers of learning to happen outside of the context of the actual story.
Definitely. And this gets them thinking, right? This builds not just socio-emotional skills, it also builds critical and analytical skills for the child, right? And generally, I have parents coming to me and saying, you know, when I read to my child, they don't sit in a place, they just roam around the room, they don't show interest. But I tell them, still go on reading, because what happens is that the learning processes in a child is different from adults. We need to sit down and concentrate and learn. But for a child, something is going on in the background and they're still listening to it. They're still listening to your voice, though they're playing with their blocks. So when you start with an activity for reading, read at least 15 minutes to a child every day. Go ahead, do that. And when they find the inspiration, when they find the interest, when they hear your voice changing tones and you animating it in this way, the child will turn back and be interested, and they will sit down and listen to you. But that is a process.
So what I'm also hearing now, which I hadn't thought about before, is, you know, when you talk about the first 1,000 days, you're really talking about the first 0 to 3 years, right? And then a few extra days along the way, or a few days fewer than 3 full years. But even if they don't have the capacity to speak, and they might not even understand language yet, you're saying from the minute they come out of the womb, or even while they're in the womb, you're saying read to them as if they were there, understanding, with the intonation, the whole 9 yards, because somehow their brain is
developing like that, and it's getting wired like that. And when I say the first 1,000 days, I don't say stop reading after that. It's like continue reading until they are 8, until they are 9. And then there will be a shift, you know, where the child will go and say, you know what, I'm interested in this book. I'm interested in these topics. I want to explore more books on this particular value. I want to hear stories about courage. These are the ways you can introduce different values and build a culture in the household itself, which is geared towards talking about feelings, emotions, values, and abstract things, which you cannot sit down and explain, but pick up a story, talk about forgiveness, how a character forgives another character, and that's it. The child will grasp that abstract concept.
That's so interesting, because I imagine in families where there are siblings, there are a lot of stories that can be used to teach and help develop that inter-sibling relationship, or even outside of the sibling situation, like friends at school or grandparents or whatever, kids on the playground. That's so fascinating. Do you believe the book should be more representative of society around us? I do too, but let's hear professionals say, why is that the case? And do you have any recommendations of children's books that could help with that?
Yes, definitely. Actually, if I talk about my personal experience, growing up, I did read a lot, but I was very aware of the fact that books that were available to me were about a Tom in the UK or about Erin in the US doing something that I couldn't really relate to, because my society and the way I grew up was very different. But of course, it did open up different worlds for me. That is true. And now I see, as a society, we have evolved and we are addressing these issues. But still, a lot of work has to be done. But there is incremental growth in India or in Canada too. It befalls on organizations like ours, because we are a library, that we have to make our book collections more representative. And representative has not, it should not be performative, right? It shouldn't be about stories about disabled children or children with different abilities, doing something for making that as the central focus of the book. It should be about differently abled children doing everything that is normal, but maybe a bit differently, so that other children who are reading the story understand that any child or any individual who is differently abled still can achieve everything and anything in life, and do it just a bit differently maybe, and that's okay. So the representation should not be performative as such. The book should not talk about the same stereotypes that a particular racialized community or a community from a particular heritage is already stereotyped into doing. It should be about a child from a South Asian heritage doing everything that a normal average Canadian child would do. So that befalls on us as organizations to stock up. And also, I feel that having more diverse people in, power positions who decide whose voices get published and whose voices don't will also definitely prove to be a change in this direction of books being more representative.
So I totally buy what you're saying. And I guess the next follow-up question I have is, this whole last year, let's say 12-month cycle, has had like a real lift in consciousness around anti-racism. And I just wonder whether or not you could answer the question, like, at what age is it appropriate to introduce children through books and narratives to anti-racism, just out of curiosity?
So I myself am a person of color. And for me, I think I would answer this on a very personal level, because I haven't done much research as to what age a child should be introduced. But for me, I would introduce them from day one. I wouldn't go into the intricacies of things, but I would talk about different kinds of people that are around me, and not in the particular way that they're different, but it's just normal that our society is inclusive. It has people of different colors. For example, at this point, I would like to bring up a recommendation. It's by this author, Tanya Dupré-Setlik. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She is a Canadian author from Montreal, and she's of mixed heritage. And she writes this book, Violet. So this is the little kid, a girl, who is going to school. This is her first day of school. And she's really excited about school. And then she reaches school, has a really nice day, makes friends. But at the end, when a parent comes to pick her up from school, the other children ask, why are you not the same color as your parent? Why are you violet? And Violet cannot answer this question. So she goes back home worried a bit about whether she's going to fit into that school or not. And then she goes back and she asks her mother, why am I violet? And how many times have children confronted this question? Why do I look the way I do? And how do parents find these tools and resources to answer these questions to children? And this book gives you a resource right there. So the mother goes and she brings in two colors and see, this is red and this is blue. And when you mix them together, you get violet, and that's why you're violet. And she's so confident. The next day she goes to school and she says, you know what? I am red because one of my parent is, I'm violet because one of my parent is red and one of my parent is blue. This is a very, a fun way of introducing. And this is such a relatable situation that it could happen to any child anywhere, right?
Yeah, great. Do you have any other recommendations?
Sure, I can start with this author that I love, Rukhsana Khan. She's a Toronto-based author, but she has a Pakistani heritage. And she writes this book, Big Red Lollipop, okay? And in this book, she talks about this culture clash that happens with newcomer families and this sibling rivalry that takes place in every family, right? So this little child is invited to her friend's birthday party, but her mother is insisting that she has to take her younger sister with her, but she doesn't want to, but she ends up taking because she cannot fight her mother, right? She's not really happy about that situation. But when things are reversed and her younger sister has to take her older sister when she's invited to a birthday party, the older sister understands and she says, it's okay, I won't come with you. So the concept of forgiveness, right? Even though she was troubled by this particular situation, but she agreed to not go with her younger sister just because that is the right thing to do, right? And that kind of books teach children about forgiveness, about appreciating sibling bonding and making it, strengthening it. And also, this book is lovely because, no matter what background your family is from or what ethnicity your family belongs to, some problems are just common. You just hate your siblings sometimes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We share that across the globe, right? That's a very human thing that we have in common. Any others?
Yeah, sure. By the same author, I want to talk about this book, King for a Day. And this is a child growing up in Pakistan. The story is set in Pakistan. And this child wants to be king for a day during the festival of Basant. The Basant is the festival of kites. So he wants to cut as many kites as possible so that he can be king for a day. And through this, the child wants to help his neighbor. She's a little girl who is being bullied by her brother. So his ultimate aim is to help the little girl. But this child at the same time is disabled. But the focus of this story is not about his disability, but it is about him becoming the king for a day. And that is what I love about the story. It tells children that, you know what? Yes, there is this challenge that this person is going through, but that's it. That challenge doesn't define the person. What the person wants to achieve, what the child wants to achieve, what are the goals that the child sets for himself is what defines the child. And that is a great lesson right there.
Yeah, a reflection that I'm having that I don't even care to admit this is that we know, for example, about nutrition, right? We would want to set our kids up for a healthy life by feeding them good food, right? We kind of know they shouldn't be drinking too much pop and soda, that they shouldn't be having too many chips and chocolate. We shouldn't be taking them to fast food joints. Like we should have, the 4 food groups and nutrition. And I never really gave it enough thought that what we're exposing them to, I mean, I do pay attention to what she does if she's on YouTube or, screen time, But the books that I've had in her life are gifts that have been given, and I'm sure my friends are passing along great books, or hand-me-downs, or swaps, or something I've just picked up quickly at Winners. Like, I haven't curated like the books that my daughter is reading, and I think I could do a better job of that. So one of the questions I have is, where would parents go to get information about books that are helpful at different stages of development based on the goals and the kinds of messages they want their children to be exposed to?
Sure. This is a very important question, because many parents come to us with these questions because they want to do a lot of things, but they don't know where to go for help. And the first thing that I always tell them, of course, if there are partners, the parents at our partner locations, they can always ask us, and they can always come back to the mini-biblios that they have at the partner locations to borrow books. But the public library is a treasure. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of libraries in a community and in sustainable development of a community. And if you go to a librarian, they will be really happy because it's a person-to-person resource, right? I know it's very difficult during the time of COVID, but of course, other times I would definitely recommend parents to go to their public libraries around the corner and talk to them. And of course, at the same time, there are many resources available online. People who curate lists and make a list of different books depending on the theme that you want to address. If you want to address a theme of healthy eating with your child, so they will give you books that don't talk about only food, but a story around food, and make the message of healthy eating very embedded into that story. So there are a lot of resources online too that people can just go on and look for.
And does anything come to mind in terms of children's books that help increase empathy? I mean, you've described some where they're empathizing with the characters by virtue of the story itself, but are there some that really kind of hit it out of the ballpark?
So I believe that each book has certain aspect of improving empathy into children, right? But this book really hits home because it's from my culture. This author from Toronto, her name is Soumya Balasubramaniam, and she wrote a book, When I Found Grandma. So it's about newcomer families and immigrant families and their children who are trying to adapt to the way of life here. And they are also trying to form a bond or a connection with what they left behind, their heritage. And in this story, there is this girl who has a grandma who's going to come and visit. In the beginning, she's really excited about it. But then when she realizes that she's very different to what she expected a grandma typically to be, she really doesn't like her grandma that much. And I can relate to this story because even if you're living in India and your grandma visits you from your village, you don't want to be seen with your grandma because you feel embarrassed. But then this is where these kind of books trigger the value for your elders, the value for learning, the value for intergenerational connections to be formed. And each generation taking steps forward towards each other to form this bond of empathy and connection. And without intergenerational connections, I think empathy would not actually exist because it is in the household that you learn about valuing others' experiences, about understanding, about trying to understand where they come from and what difference is there between you two, but how you can bridge that gap. And what are the connections you can build through that exercise? So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Well, I've so appreciated this conversation. You've given me so much food for thought, and I'm really going to look at curating my children's books differently now and how I read to her and all of that. As a final question, I love now asking my guests at the end of our dialogue, to share a time, if you can think of one, where you were on the receiving end of empathy and what that meant for you and why it's important to you.
Oh, yeah. There was this time in my life that I was going through a lot, actually, and I have my English teacher to thank to actually come out of that particular very troubling situation. I was, I think, in my 10th grade when my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and there was a lot of things were changing at home, right? Because such a diagnosis doesn't just change the situation of the person who is diagnosed with, but also the entire structure of the household and the family, and your future kind of becomes very uncertain. And I started being because I was a very good student, as girls generally are, sorry. but then I started losing interest in studies, and I used to be late to school, and I used to be lost in my own dream world because I constantly was trying to anticipate as to what will happen to my mother, and if this happens, what will happen? If that happens, what will happen? How will my father, be able to manage everything, and blah, blah, blah. These are the things that a child should not be concerned with, but you just cannot help it, right? Because the situation was like that. And then my English teacher, she caught on to the fact that I was not acting really normal. Something was bothering me, and she called me out, and she asked me as to, in a very comfortable private conversation, as to what was happening. And in the beginning, I was not really comfortable sharing with her. I had not shared anything with my friends too. And these are those teenage years, right? You're going through so much, if trying to find your identity, what you like, what you dislike. But then I went back to her and I spoke to her about what's going on with my mother. And so this action that she did of reaching out to me, of trying to find this safe space where she can talk to me, where I can explore my emotions and just, be this little girl who is going through a difficult time in her life and share this with her teacher. That really changed me. And that is also one of the motivating factors in my life that has pushed me to help children more and make that my career, actually.
Well, what I love about that story is it's from when you were in grade 10. It's like years ago, and still it's so salient and so present for you. I can sense it even across a Zoom call, how much you adore this woman, because she went above and beyond her teaching duty, which is, again, another opportunity to celebrate all teachers in the world, because they do so much more outside the classroom that stays with us forever. So thank you for sharing that story with us, Asha. It was a really great conversation about the importance of books in children's lives and how we can open their hearts and bring more compassion and purposeful empathy into their lives. So thank you so much. Thanks for watching. Yeah, it was great to have you. Thank you for joining us and listening to us. And we'll see you next week at Purposeful Empathy. Now, what if you had access to your own council of coaches to help you break free from your own thinking clutter, make that important decision, and liberate you from whatever is holding you back? At Grand Huron International, you get to select a coach of your choice anytime from anywhere. Visit grandhuroninternational.com and harness the power of on-demand coaching today.